Thaddeus. People think it's my name. It isn't. It's a rank, a myth, a legend. A cowl I donned over a century ago. The enemy has names that strike terror into our most accomplished warriors, but eventually the victory is gained by dint of the fear generated by the name, the sapping powerless certainty of loss. The endless are our enemies, so they can accrue such reputations, such legends, potent weapons unto themselves. So we turned it on our foe. We tried to generate our own legends. But not in our world, oh no. The legend, the myth, was to be generated in theirs. A fear that would sap them. Thus 40 of us were born. It was a test, a trial, but the longest-running experiment that the Inquisition has ever undertaken. The traditions, the masks. An experiment that is about to conclude, for I am the 99th Thaddeus. There will be but one more, potentially our last, and there are but few traditions left, few that have made it through the long eons, the long ages, without being snuffed out. We, the Thaddeus. We are the respected, the revered, even amongst our own, the traditions. We are one of the few who represents the balance. We are the Thaddeus. And our tradition at least feels the experiment has gone swimmingly. It's a look of eye-widening horror on the face of the terrors we meet when we declare our name. The demon that howls with recognition of the rank, and then fears. So we believe the tradition must be upheld. At least, it will not be in error that our line ends. And as we draw close to the reckoning, the final judgment, we all scramble for the exemplars that will see our line to conclusion. So there have to be the best. And he, the boy, Tarquinius, he is the best. He is my destiny, to find him, to train him. It's the only reason I am Thaddeus, for there was another, even more gifted than I, more driven, and now an implacable enemy. He has sworn to end the line, but if I do not act swiftly, his wish may be granted before he even has to raise a finger. Tarquinius, my boy, is in danger. He is a gem without measure, a rarity even amongst these wondrous stars, and I have never entirely worked him out. But I know potential when I see it. Oh yes, I do. It was impossible to miss, if I am honest. I felt the hand of the Emperor that day, I think, guiding me. All hell had literally broken loose. I had not been in time. I had taken only half my larger entourage that day, but it had not gone well. We ended one of the rites, but we did not know it was one of many. The rest had not made it out. If only Barbon had been there. Curse my timidity in the days that approached that battle. So, injured and alone, I wandered the streets of a demon-infested world. And from a large building, many rushed out onto the street, screaming and howling in sheer terror. For the walls bled, and mirrors were the portals to the ether, and many dark things stepped out. It was chaos, as it was intended. Formless, never-born entities swept across the fleeing herds and possessed any they felt. As they turned, they then gutted all around them. The slaughter was great, as one after another was possessed by these demons. And then, amongst all of that, I saw him, Tarquinius, and his miracle. A larger entity rippled through time-space, leaving only distortions in its wake, headed towards the boy. It then surrounded him, and his head snapped back and a howl emitted from his burning lungs. A howl of triumph, an inhuman howl. His muscles began to bulge and his head to twist, lifting from the ground. This was no lesser entity in play, attempting to make a puppet of his flesh. But then it happened. The boy just started to shake his head. I could see by the strained muscles around his neck that it was pure will. He was being fought every inch of the way. He is being fought the entire time by this greater entity. The slow move from side to side in a clear, no action. Deliberate. Eyes scrunched tight, jaw clenched, almost to snapping, he continued. And as he did, he started to lower to the ground, the corona around him diminishing, until finally, with one last slow but decisive shake of his head, his eyes snapped open again as his feet touched the ground. The distortion around him exploded out and dissipated as it went. He, Tarquinius, the boy, a lad of only 16 maybe, had thrown off the possession of a greater entity of the warp. I ran to him, as he gormlessly looked around as if he had not known where he was. He was in shock, as he should have been. By all rights, he should have been in a coma for weeks, his eyes burnt out at worst. But there he was, standing alert and awake, if bemused. How? I grabbed him in the crowd, and he merely followed me. We moved fast. We dodged many a close call that day, but finally we got back up to my shuttle and off the planet. All the while he was bright and alert, until finally he got into a cot to sleep, and he did so for 3 days. In all those days I did not sleep. I watched him like a hawk. Anyone possessed could be a conduit, or have their minds shattered by the experience. What woke up could be very different to the gentle boy who went to sleep. But he was like a cherub. He did not mutter, cry out, or simper. Not as I had done when it happened to me all those years ago, when I was twice his age, had the training to survive it. Even so, it near broke me, and that was a lesser entity. The boy understood when he awoke in restraints. He was calm and thankful for being saved. A wise young man indeed. We talked for hours. I had to check. Finally, he asked me to leave him in his restraints and go to sleep. So tired was I, he said. Kindness or a trap? I left him and watched him remotely for 3 further hours, auto guns trained on him at all points. I awoke 8 hours later with him humming and whistling to keep his spirits up. Over the next few days, I discerned that he was deeply affected by the shock, the trauma on every level that was witnessing the destruction of his settlement by the evil damned ones. But he was managing. But of the possession, he remembered nothing. As the days passed, whilst we travelled, we spoke more. I took down his restraints and attached him to a table instead. I'm not an idiot. He moved compliantly and saw the necessity of the deed. So logical for a young man. So empathic or analytical. But any of those traits were good. And so it began. I'd been chosen as Thaddeus for one reason. Above a man far more talented in nearly every other way. I could see the potential in others, and I could teach. My rival could not. I was literally chosen just to maintain the line and to find the best possible successor and to train them. And I had found him. In Tarquinius, I had found him. He was ravenous for everything I could teach him, worryingly so. He absorbed information like a sponge. Recall was phenomenal, even before I trained him in how to master his mind. He was brave, possibly his greatest downfall, actually. He would rush to the assistance of others without a second of hesitation. Something I had to beat out of him, I can tell you. Always assess first. Always. But it oft transpired that he had. He had already weighed all of the variables and simply acted anyway. Confident. I liked that. But again, it had to be tempered, and that takes time. I tested him regularly, frequently and remorselessly in all of those years, still never understanding how this boy could throw off a demonic possession so easily. I had even considered that he might be sensei. It would explain a lot. So I took him to meet one. Her. The most powerful and sensitive I knew of. He interested her, so much is true, but he was not the same as her. He was no child of the Emperor. Yet she told me, in private, away from the boy, that she could awaken him. She was almost frantic to do so. She said a burning star was hidden within the folds of his mind. She was astonished that he had not awoken of his own volition, knowing the adventures and evils I had subjected him to. Yet still he was contained. But he was not ready then. I wish I had let her do it, had let her awaken him there and then. Perhaps I would not have lost the twins should his power have been released. But it is always a risk I was not ready to take with him. As I said, he was the one. I had trained many an apprentice by this point, over a half-dozen, but Tarquinius, he was the one. He would be Thaddeus when I was done. And I am too old to start again, and in Tarquinius, in that boy, resides potentially the most powerful and effective, most exact personification of what it is to be the Thaddeus. So he cannot die. Not now. Not like this. Our line would end. So I have to take drastic action. The fool. He just had to rush in and avenge Fulcus and Terrin. Silly sod. Time to burn some relics, take some chances, for the stakes are simply too high not to. I can hear the escape vehicle now. Some form of VTOL, I'd imagine. Heavily armed, I'd wager. And if I've heard it for the last few seconds, they've heard it for the last few minutes at least. They're playing for time. Good. Time to give them an excuse to protract things. They only need an excuse at this stage in the confrontation. And so, here I go. Wait! Don't be hasty! We have much to offer, and the boy is a mutant. He has a noise you will never have heard before. They stop dead. We all do. Barbon has his captive as much as they have the boy. The captive is a noise marine. He sliced its leg and put it on its knees, sliding his power sword into its neck. Just for the threat of it. But the enemy mirrored the effect with Tarquinius. He had to run in to try to avenge Fulcus and Terrin. Now he is in great peril. Even so, even with half his face missing, crumpled and bloodied like a folded picture rolled in red paint, he is still alert. He seems to be concentrating on something. Perhaps just staying awake, perhaps not. They all look down at the boy as I nod at him, giving him permission, and he begins. The Marines all look at me with a cocked head, thinking exactly how droll, and how much more they are going to really take their time in killing me, when I have their undivided attention for that split second. I let it loose. My last one, damn it. But it was worth it. A fascinator. A rare item found on a planet near the Lair homeworld, wielded and devised by a race that had fought the Lair when they fell to Slanesh worship. It did exactly as categorized. It fascinated. All followers of Slanesh can only take so much stimulus before they are overwhelmed. But this simple object of light was so perfect. As to a normal sentient, it was a dazzling curio. But to a Slaneshi warrior, it was the center of the universe. All three conscious Marines gasped at it for a split second. Barbon and I moved as one, exploding into action. Barbon hooked the head off of his captive, and dashed forward to strike, was met with power steel of their own. So well disciplined, the training of them, the Emperor's children, was still very much present. and the noise marine attempted to drive Barbon away from the others, so as to keep it mano a mano. I stooped low and snarled, "On me!" as a hail of bullets then tore into the back of the second noise marine. Some went clean through, but none in vital locations. The marine staggered, but did not fall. I cursed under my breath and extended my hand at the marine over the boy. At the last, my hand slipped down and a beam came out of one fingertip and struck Tarquinius. He was covered in a blue shimmering field, a field that surrounded the segment of the blade inside his neck or so. The marine above him attempted to put in pressure to cut through the neck and behead the boy, but nothing happened. The field held the boy in some form of vacuum. Of course, I knew exactly what it was. It was one of my digital weapons. Well, we'll put it this way. It was complicated, very few uses, and this was one of the last. I did not use it without some regret, but it was important. The blade then came off at the side, and the marine took another few paces towards me, past the immobile apprentice. I drew my sword, stood tall, and said, "You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into. Do you have any idea who I am?" The marine then barked, "I'm sure you'll tell me." "I'm Thaddeus." The marine took one faltering step backwards instinctively, more out of surprise than any real fear, I think. "Pleasure to kill you, Thaddeus," said the marine. As he stalked forward, the doorway is suddenly filled by a harrowing vision. A woman, of course we know her as Ursula, with her tongue gashing blood, yanking on a piece of paper. The piece of paper I put there, I guess. As she prized it loose, the first time ever I'd seen this, the page burnt and then the bubble around us all just burst. The light from her tongue then burst from her eyes instead, as the noise marine stalking forward at myself and the one nearly toppled by gunfire and then slammed backwards. They skid across the floors and slam against the walls. The escape vehicle rises with thunder as it blasts all below it into tatters. Missiles and chain guns crisscross the entryway and butchers more of the arbites. The two blasted backwards turn and then jump into the waiting VTOL. The duel between Barbon and the other marine of evil has been one of waiting and pacing, looking for advantage. As the marine finally turns to run for the transport, he is just fast enough to elude Barbon. Just. Ursula is now staggering to where the boy is held immobile. It will fade very soon. She knows. She's seen me do it before. And she knows she will have to use all of her power of healing to save him. If she can. But I know everything will change now. Because Ursula has never had the energy to even roll her eyes before. Not while under the effect of the gaze I impelled on her. So someone must have impelled her, infused her with power. And I think I know who it was. It has happened at last. Time for Tarquinius to be rebuilt in so many, many ways.